So it's Friday, so I'm gonna give it a minute. Hopefully, my signal will work or it will work long enough for me to have this conversation. I'm not gonna be up here long. Just was thinking about some things, and since I wasn't able to do my lipstick dialogue on Tuesday because of my signal, I thought I'd try to have a little conversation this Good Friday night. So here we go. When you come in, if you will, wave at me, if you will, say hello, do something so that I know that I'm not having this conversation alone. And what I'm going to do while I'm waiting for other people to join me, I'm going to invite a few of my friends, but y'all come on in. Y'all say hello. Hang out with me for a minute on a Good Friday. Let me invite a few people. All right. Hey, y'all. Hey, Miss Renora. All is well. So listen, my signal might try to act up a little bit, so I'm going to have this conversation. So I titled this particular live, Know Your Boundaries and Stick to Them, right? Lessons in dating, right? So this applies to both men and for women, regardless of your age, your socioeconomic status, whatever. Like when you are dating, right? Everybody has their own set of boundaries, right? I don't realistically expect you all to have necessarily the same boundaries that I have, right? But what I do expect is that we have boundaries, right? You have boundaries in the sense of what is acceptable for you, right? You have boundaries in the sense of what will work for you in order to have, again, a successful relationship, friendship, whatever the process is, right? I'll just use me as an example, right? For me, I like to take my time. I like to go through the process of really trying to get to know an individual before I'm somewhere with them in private, before going through that. I like to talk on the phone, you know what I mean? That type of energy. And so that for me, if I meet someone and you know how some people are, they jump in with the full court press. They meet you yesterday. They want to come to your house. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just keep it all the way 100. Folk be trying to move in, spend the night, just a whole bunch of shenanigans. I don't even know you like that, right? So for me, I have a set of boundaries, but boundaries are healthy, right? Boundaries set an expectation, right? And boundaries also help you, right, to identify whether the individual is a fit for you, right? Boundaries don't necessarily mean that you're playing games and, you know, all the things that people will say and that they will do to try to manipulate you. No, as an adult, right? Boundaries are necessary even as a child, but we're talking about an adult. We're talking about a dating relationship or a dating situation, right? That you have to set an expectation, because if you don't set an expectation, right, then how is the person that you are trying to connect with going to know, right, what works for you, right? How are they going to know what to do and what not to do, right? And even for yourself, if you don't set boundaries or you don't set expectations, it's almost like you out here saying you go for whatever. And that is never a good idea, especially when we're talking about dating. I mean, I'm sure you don't wake up like you're welcoming any and everybody. You know what I mean? We all have to have some type of boundary. Let me give you another boundary for me, right? Another boundary that I have is that I am always cautious of people's habits, right? I like that, Renora. Boundaries will keep you out of toxic situations. That is exactly right. Now, let me say this. I don't trip about people when they say they drink a little wine. Then I don't be tripping about that. But what I will trip about, right, is if you drinking from the time you get up all during the day, at night. You always got to be lit. You always got to be turned up. For me, that is a no-go. And here's the thing, though. It's not, hey, Pastor Bar, it's not a no-go because I'm a Christian. It's always been a no-go for me because I don't do well with intoxicated people, right? So that is a boundary for me, right? So I already set the, you know what I mean? If we having this conversation, I go ahead and I set an expectation of what works and what does not work. Now, if that person does not agree with the boundaries that I have set, then may the Lord watch between me and thee, right? But you have to be okay with sticking to your boundaries because, yes, people will come along and people will try to push the limits of your boundaries. People will come along and people will try to force themselves on you. But if you stick to the boundaries, boundaries will keep you safe. That's exactly right, Pastor Bar. But if you stick to the boundaries, and listen, y'all, in order to be able to stick to some boundaries, you got to create some boundaries. And you got to have these boundaries and these expectations already in place before you enter into the dating world. Now, I don't know. Everybody's different. So maybe you set different boundaries for different people. That's not me. I have universal boundaries that if you are going to be successful with Stephanie Renee, then this is about like what it's going to be, right? And it's not like I'm saying like I'm trying to judge people. Yeah, I give people the benefit of the doubt, but I've also made the mistake because I did not stick to my boundaries. I have made the mistake before of giving people the benefit of the doubt beyond what they deserved, right? It's okay to say that it does not work for me. If they are too aggressive, if the language that they speak, if the way that they're handling you does not work for you, you are not obligated, right, to conform, right, and to adjust. Now, understand, there are sometimes, yes, you have to meet the person halfway. But we're talking about meeting halfway on some sensible things. We're talking about meeting halfway on some things that are beneficial. But I don't have to meet you halfway on something that is toxic. I don't have to meet you halfway in regards to something that steps outside of the boundaries or the expectations that I have set. And it's the same thing for you. And especially for us as ladies, because a lot of times we feel powerless, like we don't have the right or the authority to say, listen, that doesn't work for me. And you don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to be loud about it. You don't have to be boisterous. You do not have to step outside of your place of being a lady. You can still operate in grace, with full grace and full poise, and just simply identify, listen, bruh, that does not work for me. And it's the same thing for you too, men. You do not have to just tolerate. And I think a lot of times the older we get, or perhaps the longer we have been in the dating game, a lot of times people start to change their expectation or they start to lower their expectations. No. You have to trust the process, right? You have to trust that God has someone uniquely designed for you, right? Someone who can and will identify with the boundaries and the expectations that work for you. Just like you have, there's somebody out there that you can identify. Hey, Greg, that you can identify with the boundaries and the expectations that they set, right? So that's why it's important in this dating game, right, to take your time. Get to know the person before you jump in full court press, making these lifelong commitments, right? Take the time. I say this all the time. I need to know what you like when you're happy. I need to know what you like when things are not going your way. I need to know how you're going to respond if I tell you no. Because you'd be surprised, honey. A no will bring out the true essence of a person, right? And if their intentions are off, A good no will expose them. And that's when your boundaries or your expectations come into play, right? So just like the other said that boundaries will keep you. So Renora said boundaries will keep you out of a toxic relationship or toxic situations. And Pastor Barr said that boundaries will keep you safe. Absolutely. That's why it's important, right? Because you have to know. And again, for me, I also see boundaries as a way of measuring, right? Whether you are indeed getting what works for you. You know, even when we talk, because before I did that about the 80-20 rule, all of that plays in with boundaries and expectations. You have an expectation when you go to a restaurant. You don't just accept any kind of service, and you don't just accept any type of food. You have an expectation when you go anywhere, right? So why should your relationships be different? Pastor Barr says your expectation sets the standard of the relationship. That is good. Yes, sir. Valerie says time will always show you who that person is. Yes, it will. And so a lot of times, you know what I notice whenever I hear stories about individuals who ended up with somebody that they didn't really know, and I've been there before, a lot of that came because one, I did not set a boundary and I did not set an expectation. So that person had this thought that they could do whatever, that they could say whatever, and that I would be cool with it. No. And then here's the other problem. If you don't set an expectation at the beginning, or if you don't set a boundary at the beginning, I think me and my brother had this conversation, but if you don't set an expectation at the beginning, or if you don't set boundaries at the beginning, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the relationship, now stuff starts bothering you, yeah, they're going to have a hard time adjusting because they're going to be wondering what changed, right? So that's why it's important to, one, take your time in this dating process, and two, be okay and be confident with setting boundaries and expectation, but then also be confident enough to stick to your boundaries, right? Don't be worried if they threaten to leave you because you set a boundary, because that should be a sign, right, that perhaps they are not the one for you, and nor are you the one for them, right? So if you set an expectation and they don't like that expectation, listen, they got one or two choices, right? They could either get on in and act like they got some sense, or they can go on to somebody else, period. But we have to stop. We have to stop, both men and women. This is not just for women. This is for men and women. If you are still in the dating game or whatever this is, right, you have to learn how to trust the process. You also have to learn, what are your boundaries? Do you even know what your boundaries are? Do you even know what your expectations are? Before you go on one date, before you jump on out there, I'm going to need you to know what your boundaries and your expectations are, right? Life is different. Dating is different at 40 something than when you was 15 and 16. When you're 15 and 16, you don't have no boundaries because you don't know you, right? You get a little boundary when you turn about 20 and 30 because you know more about you. Come on, Greg, with the burn the road up. That you get boundaries because you learn more about you. And by the time you get 40 something, because you have built a certain life, at least you should have, right? And you've acquired some experiences, right? That's what your boundaries and your expectations should be based upon, about the experiences, about the person you've grown into, about the person you have evolved into, right? And then you go from there. But never, 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 never feel like you're doing something wrong because you set a boundary. Don't let them talk you out of your expectation. Don't let them talk you down from your expectation. It's too many people out here. It's 300 and something million people out here. Baby, if that one cannot honor your boundaries, may the Lord watch between me and thee, because we gonna be absent one from another. And you clean yourself up and you move on, right? I promise you. And that's the other reason. I'm not going to talk about it tonight, but that's the other reason why it is so unhealthy to jump into situations, being intimate and all this other stuff, and you don't even know who the person is. You don't even know if this person is really the one, right? And so you give the most valuable parts of yourself, and then you feel trapped. Slow that down. Slow that down and set boundaries and set expectations. I promise you will thank me later. All right, y'all, I'm about to go. Have a great weekend.